Liberation, a focus on feminism. Liberation was a key part in recent history. Protest was one example of liberation that happened all over the world, such as the protest of communism, social structure, and feminism. But, however, feminism was most revolutionary because it challenged the most fundamental aspect of human life, the relationship of men and women. Feminism's primary focus originally was on suffrage. Feminism in the Global South. Common problems that arose were colonialism, racism, struggle for independence, and poverty. These Southern feminists often resented Western feminism because they saw it as a new cultural imperialism. And these feminists actually sought men's help to achieve their goals, which were not all gender-based, such as their self-help groups. Feminism on an international scale. Feminists made feminism a global issue in the 60s and continued on until the present. The UN declared 1975 the Year of the Woman, and the next 10 years the Decade of Women. Overall, feminism has had many divisions, but it has also been very diverse and contested. Anthropocene era and environmentalism. Anthropocene era was humans' impact on the environment globally, and the humans have been altering the natural world for decades. Three factors that magnified human impact were population boom into the billions, the ability to tap into new energy reserves of fossil fuels, and economic growth. These three factors contributed to the massive destruction of the world's forests and grasslands. Many plants and animals became extinct due to human presence, but the human remaking of the ecosystems also increased the presence of many animals and plants. Industry also led to air pollution and in turn global warming. But overall, the change in environmental ethics was the most significant achievement of the Anthropocene era.
Hey, how come this boy turtle has more room than this girl turtle? Is that equality to you? Feminism. Look it up. Globalization is usually first brought up. It usually refers to the rapidly growing economy. The world economy has changed in the early 20th century when World War II and the Great Depression happened. These events wreaked havoc on the world economy and also gave way to some great changes. One way that it changed was after the capitalist countries won World War II, they set agreements and institutions so no one can go into another depression. A few of these agreements were the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and these institutions laid the foundation for post-war globalization. With these institutions, the kind of economy taking shape in the 20th century was called neoliberalism, which was first adopted by capitalist countries like the US and Britain, and which it was viewed that the entire world was one single and connected market, which meant it was easier to obtain a variety of products. With neoliberalism, companies now use direct foreign investment. This is because with globalization, it's cheaper and inexpensive for companies to manufacture things in other countries. This is because of cheap labor, tax breaks, and looser environmental regulations in developing countries. Credit cards also were a way of globalization occurring because the MasterCard has now appeared in 220 different countries. This little card here is funded by the World Bank in 220 different countries. That's globalization for you. Increasingly, with this huge growth of economy and direct foreign investment, there's been a lot of instability. With the distribution of wealth it has generated, the instability has included soaring oil prices, stock market crashes, and the inability to pay huge debt. And for one example, the bubble, which collapsed in the U.S., has caused millions of people to foreclose their homes, and a lot of growing unemployment. These instabilities were foundations for new global conflicts like the problems of debt to other countries, inability to agree on terms of world trade, and regulations on labor standards. With this growing economy, there's a lot of consequences that have to be made. And now an open letter to globalization. Thank you for letting me have this Asian box turtle.
Religious vitality in the 20th century was not only expressed in the spread of particular traditions to new areas, but also in vigorous response of those traditions to the modernizing and globalizing world in which they found themselves. Fundamentalism was a militant piety, defensive, assertive, and exclusive, that took shape to some extent in every major religious tradition. To threats such as invasions using military, colonial rule, and culture intrusion by Westerners, fundamentalists acted as a religious response. Although fundamentalists looked to the past for ideas and models, their rejection of modernity was selective, not wholesale. Most made active use of modern technology to communicate their message and certainly sought the potential prosperity associated with modern life. Extensive educational and propaganda efforts, political mobilization of their followers, social welfare programs, and sometimes violence to their opponents. The Islam was the most prominent 20th century fundamentalist group after these of the U.S. after World War II and the Hindus in the 1980s. Islam was expressed in many ways to renew and reform the Islam practice and to create new religious and political order. Islam had started much violence in the fundamentalist era, in the Islamic world and in the external world. Militant revolutionary fundamentalism wasn't the only religious response to modernity and globalization within the Islamic world. Muslim intellectuals and political leaders have called for a dialogue between civilizations. Others have argued that traditions can change in the face of modern realities without losing their distinctive Islamic character. Within other religious traditions as well, believers found various ways of responding to global modernity. More liberal or mainstream Christian groups spoke to the ethical issues arising from economic globalization. You can see in this graph I printed up, the overall average score of globalization has increased year by year since 2009 in our world today.
With these with this girl. Tony, that works. Every time you get sleeves, bright light.
Alright.